we have a set of documents here that have brought us into the progressive era from the 1890s through the 19-teens. And compared to what we were just looking at from the 17th, 18th, 19th century, now we see a proliferation of source material. This is from a collection created by a woman named Clarissa Livingston, a wealthy New York club woman and society leader, and it's actually a collection of all of the appeals that were sent to her from various charities around the city. So it's an amazing window into the experience of a woman who is being sort of constantly addressed and requested for aid. And in fact, the appeal of the New York Association for Improving the Condition of the Poor even raises this question. It says, why this snowstorm of appeals every morning in the mail? So from this lone vision of one person who appears once, now we have a snowstorm of documentation.
But I'm looking now at the documents that we have in front of us and thinking to myself, the ones we've looked at before, the ones I worked on, were documents produced by or about working class or poor people, one way or the other. These documents are produced by organizations and intended for the eyes of a clearly well-off, upstanding citizen, because she's being asked again and again and again for money and support. And clearly she provides some of this, some of the time at least, because she's addressed as dear friend, or the appeals are come after a couple of years of having been there before. And here we actually have the privilege of being able to look at the content of the appeal and asking ourselves, well, what kinds of arguments are they making to get Miss Livingston to contribute her bit to them? The one that strikes my eye, for example, is the National Florence Crittenton Mission. That mission was intended to care for the pregnant and about to give birth mothers of out-of-wedlock babies, let me put it that way. And those mothers would be sent off to the home where they would necessarily give up the child that they produced for adoption. They would not take the child with them, even if they wanted to. And then they would be retrained in some sense to do domestic service, to restore their moral righteousness or their moral vision, which had been lost when they became pregnant. So to ask for money for such women requires a very subtle hand. And in here, this letter actually does do that. It's written in December 17th, and it suggests that everybody else is going to have a happy Christmas, and so we should remember these unfortunate people. And then it concludes by saying, in behalf of the women and girls for whose sake we now appeal, women and girls really and earnestly striving to be better and to do better, we thank you for your appeal. So clearly, we're not asking for girls who are morally, incapable of improving. We're asking because we assume that these young women, with our guidance, can get better. And presumably, Miss Livingston or Miss Livingston friends would respond positively to that appeal.
Right, and historians have offered their own explanations for the types of charitable reform outpourings of this time period, and it is actually quite interesting to see the firsthand appeal, because often the question historians ask is about the motivations behind these efforts, whether this was a case of historical altruism or if among the wealthy people of American cities. There was a sort of a fear of nascent working class uprising, or in the case of health reform, whether there was a fear that the ill health of the families of the tenements would spread to the families who lived, in this case, on the Upper West Side. So it's quite fascinating to see the language of the appeals themselves.
All of those things are probably in the backs of people's minds, but what strikes me is that in many of these appeals, at least, the appeal is to help women to live a regular, traditional, honest life. So look at this one, for example. This is from the New York Exchange for Women's Work, which is an employment agency which basically deals with placing servants or poor women, basically women who need jobs, sometimes seamstresses and so on. And here the appeal goes as following. Have you ever thought of the many women who, through the loss of the man of the family, are themselves forced to go out into the world to seek a means of livelihood? Now here, clearly the assumption is, and this written in 1913, right. The assumption is a woman wouldn't go out into the world to seek a living if she hadn't lost a man in the family, a father or a husband. Untrained and untaught in the methods of business necessity presses hard upon them, and they are at a loss which way to turn, i.e. we're going to help them get a job, but we're going to help only those women who have, through no fault of their own, lost the man in their family.
Right.
So, like the Crittenton home, there's a moral injunction.
That's right. These are the deserving,
poor.
In this case, the argument is to make them deserving, even if they've already trespassed against some of the main moral codes of the moment.
Exactly right.